Okay. No problem. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this town meeting to order. It's now 7 o'clock. Welcome. If you could all just make sure that you silence your cell phones. We'll have 2 microphones floating tonight for anybody who wants to make comments or questions. We'll float around, put your hand up, and we'll definitely find you. Our first order of business tonight is to elect a moderator. Can I hear any nominations from the floor? Ed McEnany has been nominated as moderator for this evening. Do I hear a second? Are there any other nominations? None said. All in favor of Ed McEnany being the moderator for today, say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Ed, you are the moderator.
Thank you and good evening. Welcome to this town meeting. So the first order of business is to ask the rest of you if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, I'll ask the town clerk to come back up here and please read the notice of this evening's meeting.
Thank you. This is the legal notice of a town meeting for the town of Suffield. Notice is hereby given that a town meeting of the inhabitants of the town of Suffield, Connecticut, qualified to vote in town meeting, will be held in the auditorium of the Suffield Middle School, 350 Mountain Road, on Wednesday, January 15, 2020 at 7 p.m. for the following purpose to wit. Number 1, subject to the approval of the Board of Finance, to consider and vote on the transfer of $567,583.53 from the Remington Street Bridge project and $50,000 from the McAllister Roof project to a streetlight acquisition and retrofit project. Number 2, to consider the development of town parcel of Ffyler Place / relocation of highway garage, including utilization of tax increment financing, including a credit enhancement agreement under the Town Center TIF District Master Plan and policy, and adjourn to a vote at a referendum to occur on January 28, 2020, and to consider the acquisition of 1160 South Street in the amount not to exceed $2,400,000 and transfer of 44 Ffyler Place as a condition of the contract, and adjourn to a vote at the referendum to occur on January 28, 2020. Dated at Suffield, Connecticut, this 28th day of January 2020, Board of Selectmen for the Town of Suffield, Melissa M. Mack, Selectman, Timothy Reynolds, Selectman, Peter Hill, Selectman, Kathleen Harrington, Selectman, Jeremiah Mahoney, Selectman. This appeared in the Journal Inquirer.
Thank you, Kathy. All right. All right, so the first matter, I'm going to take a motion in a moment, but which was the first resolution, which was regarding the $567,583.53 from the Remington Street Bridge project to the streetlight acquisition and retrofitting. So that matter was defeated by the Board of Finance. In other words, it wasn't approved for the Board of Finance. Consequently, it's not properly before the town meeting this evening. I'd like to take a motion to table that motion, and we'll go ahead on that basis. Do I have a motion for that? Is there a second for that? All those in favor of tabling the first motion only, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. That matter is tabled. Okay. Now we're going to move on to the second and third. Actually, we're going to combine the two, I think. The second and third resolutions, that's regarding the highway garage and the acquisition of the 1160 South Street property. So for that purpose, I'll recognize the first selectman for purposes of providing us with a presentation. So if you'd please give attention to this.
Thank you, Ed. Good evening. Thank you all for coming once again to hear the continuing due diligence on the development of the town parcel on Ffyler Place and the relocation of the town highway garage. I want to start by thanking all of the town employees and boards and commission members who have really been diligent and put a lot of time and effort into getting us to the point we're at today. I'm going to back up a little bit and start a little bit behind, because I see many new people in the audience this evening, and I want to make sure that they have at least some of the benefit of the work that's gone to this point. So Suffield's top priority right now is financial freedom. The state of Connecticut is in financial turmoil, as we all know. Suffield will continue to receive less aid from the state. Many of the programs the town relies on have yet to be funded via bond funding at this point in time. Unless we do something now, we will be forced to reduce services, municipal and educational, or significantly raise taxes to keep up with the increasing operational costs and wages, some of which are contractually bound through union negotiations. Financial independence requires Suffield to diversify its tax base by attracting more commercial investment to town to shift the burden away from the residential taxpayer. So how do we do this? We develop Ffyler Place in the heart of the town center. Developers have told us for decades that we need more density, which means people, and to get rid of the highway garage or they won't even consider Ffyler Place. A 2012 market analysis said the public garage must be relocated to attract the development envisioned and desired. In accordance with the town's adopted plan of conservation and development, we have been trying to move the highway garage and develop Ffyler Place for economic development purposes for at least 15 years. The Town Center Village District regulations were adopted in 2004, specifically to increase both commercial and residential density. We have drawings from 2008 and 9 of a comprehensive mixed-use plan for all of Ffyler Place. It's a beautiful, comprehensive plan, but the market has not supported it or been interested in over the last 15 years. It was frankly presumptuous of us to make plans for an entire site that the town does not own. The town only owns 3.5 of the 27.8 acres comprising Ffyler Place. In June 2017, the town adopted the Town Center Tax Increment Financing District Plan and Policy as an economic development tool. This is the TIF that you will hear more about as the presentation continues. Based on our review, the town has spent at least $148,000 trying to get this project moving since 2005. We've reviewed other existing buildings and multiple third-party and town-owned properties to build a new highway garage. Many of you have been to those meetings where these alternative locations and plans were discussed. Since being first selectman, I have been discussing this for the better part of 4 years. So even a motivated first selectman has had to spend an inordinate amount of time on this question to get us to this point. We've done the work, we have all the tools, and it's more than time to move forward and move the garage. So what's the big picture? To create a vibrant town center. We are in various stages to build and connect sidewalks to the Town Center Village District. We want to capitalize on town center assets, provide more usable and livable space. We want to continue our traffic calming measures to make it a place where people feel comfortable walking. And to that end, we have, as I mentioned, sidewalks from Thompsonville Road to the high school being funded by grants we've received that are in various stages of construction. So what is the problem with the existing garage? Here is our existing garage. We demolished and remediated 2 dilapidated outbuildings in 2017 at a cost of $18,000, but this was just a start. This view does not entice developers to have vision for what the town center could be or want to invest in Suffield. The highway garage was originally built in 1974. The location might have been fine then, but times have changed and Suffield has not. Just to give you a frame of reference, to keep the highway garage where it is currently at 44 Ffyler Place, it needs a new roof, it needs to repoint the exterior walls and seal coating, and the installation of a wash bay at approximately $550,000. These prices were from the last year or so there's probably some escalation in that as well. We no longer need to do the work that was proposed in earlier versions to the dog pound because we will be entering a third-party agreement with an alternative private facility, so the dog pound will be moved. What do we receive currently in tax revenue today from our parcel on Ffyler Place? Well, you can see the privately owned parcel of the 24.31 acres, 19 approximately in personal property, real property 50, 69. The cell tower lease, which will remain, we will continue to receive this income even if we decide to move forward and develop, is $64,400 for a total of $133,400. Cleaning up and developing the town-owned parcel will serve as a catalyst for other investment in Suffield because it shows a commitment by the town to support economic development. In addition, CVS at the front, the entrance of Ffyler Place contributes approximately $68,000 in real property taxes, plus personal property taxes. So that gives you kind of an idea of what, if we do some additional development, the type of revenue we can expect. For illustrative purposes, if we developed on the town parcel, if the development of the town parcel results in 1 new freestanding restaurant next to the new CVS, say, similar to 3 Figs, it could generate a minimum of $10,000 in new annual taxes. So what's this proposed plan? The developer will renovate 1160 South Street to town specifications as a highway garage. Those specifications are set forth in a space needs study that we performed a few years ago on what we actually need to operate a highway garage. Contingent on an inspection, the town will purchase 1160 South Street as the highway garage. The garage will move to 44 Ffyler Place. The developer will remediate the environmental contamination at 44 Ffyler and build 45 units of apartments or condos, market rate apartments, condos at 44 Ffyler Place. And just as a caveat, since the last presentation, we have taken some additional steps to look into some grant funding that I will address with respect to the environmental remediation that would be an enormous benefit to the town. So what are the deal terms? The town would pay $2.4 million and transfer 44 Ffyler Place, subject to the environmental remediation. The developer will renovate to the town space needs study and transfer 1160 South Street. We will pay the developer back for the environmental remediation to the tune of $727,000 over 15 years from new tax revenue through the TIF district that I mentioned before, generated through the TIF district, exactly what the TIF was put in place to do. The developer will remediate the 727 of environmental contamination, subject to all the risk that comes with it. And new tax revenue from redevelopment of Ffyler Place will be on the town side, and the developer will build the 45 market rate condos and apartments. As I mentioned, this transaction will relieve the town of its liability with respect to the contamination and pass that risk to the developer. Multiple Connecticut brownfields grants have been submitted by the town over the years, but not awarded for the town to remediate the property that had served as an earlier town dump and that now serves as the garage. But we had no developer or plan, and so DECD declined to fund us. In this case, the developer would be contractually bound to build the 45 units of market rate condos and apartments. How do we know he'll do that? Because we don't pay him back the 727 under the credit enhancement agreement unless he does so. We will also get a performance bond or another commercially reasonable guarantee to make sure that he carries out what we contract for. So the Connecticut Brownfields Land Bank is what I mentioned earlier that you haven't seen before if you've attended some of these presentations. It was set up by the Connecticut legislature to serve as an intermediary to address that polluting municipalities like Suffield can't access brownfields grants, and neither can developers. It was meant to serve as the middle person, the expert in brownfields remediation. This organization has done dozens of these types of deals. They have access to money for due diligence to assure that we know everything about the site beyond what we already know. We've already done a phase 1 and 2 and 3 environmental, and we have a remediation plan. But they will take it one step further and make sure there's nothing missing. Then we will have a really clear handle on what it would cost to remediate this property. In addition, they also can access the grant money offered by the state and other brownfields grants to manage the remediation process and navigate the very complicated process with Connecticut Deep. We've had discussions with the Connecticut Brownfield Land Bank. This project, they are interested in it. It fits squarely within its mission, but similar to other grant applications and opportunities, it's only available with a development deal in hand. So if we obtain a grant, it will, again, relieve us of the $727,000 remediation payment obligation under the credit enhancement agreement that we enter with the developer. So again, as I mentioned before, part of the deal terms is we would pay back the developer for remediating the site over time through the tax increment financing, the extra tax income that we realize from the development on Ffyler Place. If we get a grant, it relieves us of that responsibility, and all of that new tax revenue goes right back into the town. So the land exchange. The town trade would be 44 Ffyler Place, 3.5 acres, appraised value in 2019, the land of $229, building $559, and improvements of $19.2 for an appraised value of $807. The environmental cleanup costs estimated as of about a year ago were $727,000, which makes a net value to that property at this point of $80,200. We also have a study that was done before that if we were to clean up the property, the land value alone would only increase to $400,000. The developer would trade 1160 South Street, 1.97 acres, with an appraised value of, at 2019, of $1,375,900. Just a few extra facts is that, coincidentally, our appraised building at 559, as you recall, needs about $550,000 in capital improvements to remain there. The list price on 1160 South Street has been between $1.375 million and $1.1 million over time. The Clean Phase 1 environmental study performed on 1160 South Street in 2005 There's been warehouse business activity on the property since 2005, so that does not suggest that there would be any new contamination since the study. However, if our deal goes through and moves forward, an updated and new environmental study would be required as a condition of closing. What could potential new tax revenue look like? This assumes the site is cleaned up and developed. Scenario number 1 is a very conservative estimate for future taxes of 45 units of condos apartments. Scenario 2 is what the developer expects to receive based on the quality of his investment. And so you can see if you go down the line in scenario 1, with the land building and improvements, the appraised value would be $6 million, over $6 million. Assessed at 70% of that, 4,252. Based on our 1920 mill rate, $122,000 in taxes. The baseline assessment, now what the baseline assessment is that back under the tax increment financing district policy and procedure, we set a baseline. So what we say that any taxes earned up to that baseline amount go back into the town's general fund for the general uses of the town. Anything above that baseline amount goes into the tax increment financing district, which in this case is the town center village district. Some have questioned, do we really need more housing stock in Suffield? Current market demand supports developing market rate 1 to 2 bedroom apartments and condos for empty nesters looking to downsize and young adults not ready or interested in larger home ownership. There are clear studies establishing this that the Economic Development Commission has looked at. So back to the TIF money and the incremental taxes that would be realized from this development. The rest of the incremental taxes go into the district and may be used for really a very wide variety of purposes, including it could be used to pay the debt service on the $2.4 million used to purchase 1160 South Street, should we choose to bond that amount. We could use it for repayment under the credit enhancement agreement with the developer if we don't pursue a grant with the Connecticut Brownfields Land Bank. We could use it to purchase the streetlights in the district from Eversource and the extension of the town road to access the relocated highway garage, as well as other qualified expenses in the TIF district. We could also use it to replace the boiler in Town Hall if we wanted to, because that's located in the TIF district. This is exactly what the town intended when it adopted the TIF in 2017. So assume the new tax revenue will increase with inflation, but at a starting point, we are in the range of $122,000 to $181,000 of taxes. Remember that the town only owns 3.5 of the 27.8 acres in Ffyler Place. So development of the remainder of the 24.3 acres would also result in additional new tax revenue, obviously based on the use of the property. So what's the best case scenario? Ffyler Place is developed with housing. The developer or the Connecticut Brownfields Land Bank assumes and remediates the town's environmental obligation. Beginning in year 2, we see new annual tax revenue of $122,000 to $181,000 a year. The taxes are due regardless of occupancy. So this is an important thing. So people have said, what if nobody wants to live in these things? It doesn't matter. The developer has to pay us the taxes based on their intended use. So it's guaranteed annual tax revenue. $2.4 million for the renovated 1160 South Street we would pay. If we bonded for 20 years at 2%, the total debt, $3,138,000, annual payments would be about $191,000 to $122,000. The new annual tax revenue will pay for $2.4 million total debt service and the $727,000 remediation obligation under the credit enhancement agreement, and that again assumes that we didn't get a grant. The state or the Connecticut Brownfields Land Bank awards the Brownfields grant of $727,000 in satisfaction of the town repayment obligation under the CEA. So this is the best case scenario. It would serve as a catalyst to redeveloping the remainder of Ffyler Place. The highway garage obstacle to Ffyler Place private development would be removed, and the minimal new density in the town center, which is, again, the things that the developers have been complaining about for years. The present value of the expenditure, assuming $200,000 for each of the units, is that the town would make $808,000 in taxes above its expenditures over 20 years. So this could really be an investment in Suffield's financial independence. The present value of the expenditures, assuming the lower amount of $135,000 each, is the town would spend only $185,000 over the 20 years. And again, those 135, it's a very, very low conservative estimate. And again, the likelihood of us qualifying for a grant would make those numbers even bigger. So what's the downside? What is the worst case scenario? We can't develop Ffyler Place. The remediation is cost or otherwise prohibitive. For instance, what if it's a sacred burial ground or it ends up being an archaeological site or some other reason why we just cannot build it? Then we would have no new tax revenue. We would have spent $2.4 million for the renovated 1160 South Street. We would still be obligated to pay, whether it's outright or under debt service. Again, if we bonded $2.4 million for 20 years at 2%, the total debt of over $3.1 million and annual payments of $191 to $122. Well, I can tell you that in this fiscal year, 2021, this upcoming one, the town's debt service is reducing by $284,350. So what this means is that even under the worst case scenario, the town can absorb the cost of this project without impacting your taxes. Continuing on the worst case scenario, if the highway garage is removed and we have new open space. So what would happen if we couldn't develop there? We would have taken down the buildings. And so now we would either plant grass, turn it into a park, pave it, some other encapsulation where we wouldn't have to do anything. And in that case, the obstacle to development of the remaining privately owned property on Ffyler Place would be gone. So some of our goal would have been achieved. And we could chalk it up to the fact that the town invested in its economic development. So this again shows the worst case scenario outcomes. The bottom line would be no negative impact on the mill rate based on what we know now, and an investment in economic development. And then a point to look at on the right is that right now we are spending $104,000 in annual rental over at 230C Mountain Road. If we are able to purchase 1160 South Street, it comes with an extraordinary amount of additional office space where we would either be able to use it as swing space while we're remodeling Town Hall, or maybe even decide to permanently locate some of our, maybe the building department or some of our other town offices over there. Okay. I just wanted to show you what we've invested in economic development over the years. We moved from a full-time economic development director to a consultant in fiscal year 18-19. Which resulted in savings. My recommendation is that we invest those economic development dollars and the savings in a way that can show real results to our town. My role was to do as much due diligence as needed to get us to this point, to allow us to make an informed decision. That will be up to the taxpayers and the residents when you vote at referendum in a couple of weeks. Now it is up to the developer to provide us with the answers to all of our outstanding questions that will allow you to decide if this is the right time and the right deal to move Suffield forward. And I thank you all for your interest in this project. Thank you. And I would invite Kevin Casey, the developer, up to continue his presentation. Okay. Sure.
We are moving to the Good evening. My name is Kevin Casey. Thank you, one and all, for coming out. We have been it's been a long road to get to this point. We are clearly at the point in time where a decision will be made by the town taxpayers, and we look forward to answering any questions tonight that you might have. But at first, I'd like to just make a couple of remarks, and some of them will be redundant. I apologize to Melissa's remarks. but sort of want to make sure that I touched all the bases. And the proposal to relocate the town garage is not only about choosing to move away from the benign neglect of a town facility. It's really about unlocking Suffield's future. In addition to providing a modern, more efficient, better located DPW garage, it's about the long-planned redevelopment of a truly important place at the very center of Suffield's Town Center Village District. But like every other public expenditure, what matters most is not to seek either the most expensive solution or to seek the cheapest possible solution, but really to find the best one, which means optimizing the benefits for the amount of taxpayer dollars spent. That's what this proposal has been about from the beginning, and it's why at each step for over a year now, it's moved forward. There are alternatives, and several have been proposed to the town in the last few years and rejected. After a year's worth of scrutiny by the elected and appointed town officials, to whom I am very grateful, it's being presented now for taxpayers to ultimately decide at a referendum in 2 weeks. The town's vision for Ffyler Place, one of the very few instances of consensus on any issue in this town and in general these days, is that a dynamic mix of residential and commercial uses designed and built to conform to the standard of Suffield's historic beauty is what everybody seeks. Working closely with the town planner and with real collaboration with the Planning and Zoning Commission, we proposed a revision to the zoning text which would allow the process to begin in a limited way with an upscale residential use. The relocation of the garage is a critical first step, and I will outline the details of that tonight. But before I do, I want to reiterate that it's the end game that matters. What will a redeveloped Ffyler Place do for the town of Suffield? According to virtually everyone who has an opinion, it is the key to economic development and smart growth, which are essential to any town's long-term health. Let me remind everyone that just this past September, there was a proposal made and quickly dismissed, thankfully, to charge Suffield High School students to play for sports and to charge them to pay to park their car when they went to school. The town of Suffield. So, the efficient use of taxpayer funds for public infrastructure and for facilities matters. It matters to a town. It's about being efficient with the use of taxpayer funds. This is the current town garage. Contrary to some opinions, it's not an embarrassment, but its location was perfectly acceptable when the entire area was desirable. Now, however, it's substandard in nearly every way. The building is obsolescent, and its age, footprint, and especially its location make the prospect of reinvestment foolish. It lacks many of the essential elements of a safe, efficient workplace for the employees and for the equipment that are used to, in turn, keep the town of Suffield safe and beautiful. Regardless of the overarching need for the town to redevelop Ffyler Place, based on the studies done for the town, significant capital, meaning taxpayer dollars, are needed right now to fix urgent problems. The building's spaces are undersized and inefficient and lack basic systems. It does not have a sprinkler or fire suppression system, a proper exhaust ventilation system, or adequate space for cold storage of off-season equipment, which of course prolongs the life of valuable machinery and other town assets. Melissa already put this up. I apologize. I still had the dog pound in there, so I hope you'll forgive me. This is a slide that shows the history of my involvement in this project for just the last year, although it started slightly before that. As you can see, we met with the Board of Selectmen 7 times, the Board of Finance 3 times, Planning and Zoning 5 times. At each step, these were public hearings and public information sessions, and we were able to share with those boards and commissions and take direction from those boards and commissions about the project, the merits of the project, and why it was in Suffield's best interest. Now, spending $550,000 is not a solution to a problem. It's a Band-Aid. And I think any reasonable people would understand that, because it doesn't change what Ffyler Place is. Now, the town of Suffield has already been contemplating the relocation of the DPW facility. In March of 2018, after several proposals were offered and rejected, an independent space needs analysis was commissioned and done by the architectural and engineering firm EDM. There had been a previous one by Sage Engineering several years before. And in this study, which has been available for almost 2 years to everyone, the requirements for a replacement facility were set forth. The study is published on the town's website, but in summary, the important elements are these. A replacement facility would need room for 11 bays, including 7 general bays, 2 lifts, and 1 hoist, room for a wash bay, cold storage, secondary containment chemical storage space, office support space, kitchen, bunk room, locker room, and everything would have to be ADA compliant. The total required space, according to the independent needs analysis, is approximately 20,000 square feet. With this in mind, I proposed to the Board of Selectmen and then to the Board of Finance to renovate the 30,000 square foot building located in one of the town's 2 industrial zones, so that it would meet all the requirements set forth in this independent needs analysis and would do so at a fraction of the cost of constructing a new facility. I began by assembling a professional team, and the 2 boards, Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, authorized the first selectman to likewise hire an outside professional engineer to help conduct due diligence. So you'll see that I hired the firm QA&M Architecture, which happens to be the same firm that is managing the design of the renovation of the town hall currently. That was pretty fortuitous. We sort of stumbled on that because I went to them because they do virtually all municipal projects, municipal facilities, fire stations, public safety stations, DPWs, town halls. So my consultants basically pushed me in that direction, and it turned out that they had just signed the deal with the town. They won the RFP to become the town's architect. So there's a really nice synergy there because as they're programming the town hall renovation, the possibility of utilizing some space, which we'll get to in a second, may have some further cost savings for the town of Suffield. J.R. Russo, professional engineers for the civil engineering, which you'll see in a minute, was pretty extensive because of what we had to do at 1160 South Street. Milone and McBroom, structural engineers, innovative engineering services, mechanical engineers, and associated contractors of Hartford, which is one of the oldest and most prestigious general contractors in Connecticut. And then the town hired Sweezak Associates as a structural engineer to sort of give them an independent review of what we were proposing. When the final, so these professionals all together suggested several key improvements and betterments that would be necessary to make this work. When the final general scope of work was completed, and as directed by the boards of finance and selectmen, we sought a letter of opinion as to the suitability of the building for conversion for use as a highway garage. We received two. The first letter was from our architect, and you can see that we highlighted the important point. Based on my field review of the existing property and my direct experience with the DPW facilities for other municipalities, it is my professional opinion that with the proper upgrades and modifications, the property will be well suited for the intended use. The second letter is from Sweezak Associates and working exclusively for the town. Based upon our review and discussions, it is our professional opinion that the existing facility can be upgraded to be utilized in an industrial, municipal garage use when integrating enhancements to the items discussed above that are designed to meet the requirements of the state building code and are consistent with engineering principles and good construction practice. This may be the most crucial point made tonight at this town meeting. The town's hired consultant stated that if the proposed renovations and improvements and betterments are made, the building is well suited to serve as the town's DPW facility. In order to reorient the building's use from vertical to horizontal, it was necessary to acquire property from the abutting neighbor to the south, known to most of you as Executive Valet Parking, now owned and operated by Park and Fly. Because we were able to negotiate to acquire not only a 25-foot strip, but an additional acre immediately behind our property, we were able to leave the town-owned land to the north virtually untouched. This is the access road that was put in for the development of 1150 South Street. And the town of Suffield owns this land. It's called Parcel 3 in the sort of local nomenclature, and it is 27 acres of land that the Economic Development Committee and the consultants and professionals, the town planner, the selectmen, everybody wants to see developed in some industrial commercial use for the additional tax revenue that that would bring. So when this building was developed, beautifully I might add, this driveway road, if you will, was constructed to serve not only that building, but the town has a perpetual easement over it to access its own land. In our proposal, negotiated with the town thus far, the town would construct the extension of this road on its own property, and at that point the town would have access not only to the property next door that they would own if the project is approved, but also to the rest of the property. So it's sort of an economic development win, it's a tangential to what we're doing. We would be responsible for the improvement of the land in this area, which would be the construction of the driveway into the property and the fueling station, which will be moved from Ffyler Place. As part of our budget, we've included moving expenses for the fueling station, which is largely a cement pad and above ground tank and the lighting and stuff that goes with that. And then because we were able to acquire the land that's marked in yellow here, we now have the ability to utilize the side of the building and also to situate the salt shed on this already improved acreage in the back. So previously we had considered and proposed to the town to utilize some of the town's own land here, and because we were able to make this transaction, we no longer have to do that. So with very little disruption to the 27 acres that make up, 21 acres of town land here, the town sort of reaps the benefit of a new access point into it. So by moving by acquiring that land, we're now able to This is a hardline engineered drawing of the same that we just tried to show you graphically. Probably you'll see the existing driveway here and the entrance into the DPW facility there. This is a rendering of the proposed side of the building, which shows 8 overhead doors of 14 feet width, which would create 16 bays. That would be 8 double-stacked bays as necessary. Remember, the space needs analysis called for 11 bays. So working with the director of the DPW over the last year, we sort of came up with this solution, if you will, which gives plenty of room for both the cold storage, you'll see here, and the ability to house all of the trucks. Now, in order to do this, the building needed some work. One of the things that the structural engineers came to us with was the fact that the cement floor had to be reinforced, and so part of our budget is to pour 6 inches of new reinforced concrete over the existing base, and that was approved by both our engineer and the town's engineer. So we will also have a door. There are doors existing on the back of the building now, loading docks here, and at grade entrance right here. This door will be expanded and improved, and the wash bay will be located here, and that will also double up as if necessary, the largest 10-wheel truck could use that as a dedicated bay when the DPW fellows bring it inside. However, very recently, in the last 24 hours, we were able to determine that even the 10-wheel truck, which was the object of a lot of discussion in the last several months with several people that I've been working with on the Permanent Building Committee, even the 10-wheel truck fits and is able to use the 8 bays, on the side. So we can get into that a little bit later if somebody has a specific question about it. So the back door on the rear of the building is still going to be improved to a full-size overhead door because it's going to be the wash bay, and it's probably mostly going to be the wash bay and not necessarily the dedicated bay for the 10-wheel truck. Next, we have, so that's a rendering of the building as it would look. You notice that there is you may notice, although it's subtle, and that's the way it should be really, this is a built-out elevator that the building does not now have and will be able to be service both first and second floors of the office. And of course, you see the 8 new overhead doors. And as a matter of fact, you see this metal panel here above the doors. The architect and engineer agreed that the right way to do this, from loading factors and such, is that there would be steel that goes from the base right to the roof and all the way up at each door, so that probably the best way to do that is to take out that entirety of that masonry and actually run steel right to the top and then cover it with a metal skin. And I'm sorry if that's getting a little mundane, but these are questions that will come up, and we've addressed every one of them. Not Kevin Casey, not Melissa Mack, not even Mark Servione, but really licensed professional architects and engineers whose job it is to make sure it's done right. So using some of their architects' as-built, this is sort of what the inside of the building will look like. We invited everybody on every board and commission to come down and look at the building and to get a sense of the scope and the size of the building several months ago. And this is pretty much what it looks like inside, and this is what it will look like when the fixtures that have to do with vehicle maintenance, exhaust. This is an as-built of a typical DPW garage that we will be replicating. This is the wash bay that I referred to on the back wall, and this wash bay is almost identical to the one that we will build, with the exception that this cement wall will be a curtain system, so that there can be easy access when it's not being used as a wash bay to go in and out and around the building. So wash bays are important to DPW garages. We don't have one now. You don't have one now on Ffyler Place, although the system has been purchased, but it hasn't been installed in Ffyler Place because it's really prohibitively expensive to retrofit that old building for that. So, but they're very important for DPW garages from an environmental point of view and from maintaining the asset, maintaining that those trucks are valuable, they're expensive, and that's why they've become a part of every DPW garage. This is just a representation of the secondary containment chemical storage room, which is part of the scope of our work to create a place where hazardous, oil, petroleum products are stored. That's part of the scope of work. And First Selectman referred to the opportunity that's presented because of the fact that there's 10,000 square feet of office space. One last important consideration for Suffield taxpayers. Should this project go forward, there's, in addition to the 20,000 square feet of garage space, which, if you remember, was the number that the needs analysis said it had to be, there is approximately 10,000 square feet of office space on 2 floors. Now, right now, the fact that it's on 2 floors wouldn't be much help to anybody because there's no elevator. And of course, with ADA requirements, if the town were going to be involved in anything, or even probably if a new user was going to come in, they might have to. So we have an elevator as part of the scope of work, which I showed you on the outside of the building. As part of the scope of the renovation that we have negotiated with the town, the first floor will be completely refurbished. This is a picture of the first floor, with new bathrooms, new carpeting, painting, and the expansion of the kitchen and lounge area. So the town, if the town so chose, it would be able to house all of the employees that are currently housed at Mountain Road, thereby saving approximately $100,000 a year of taxpayer money that's renting that space. So now I just want to remind you about the Board of Education asking to have the kids pay to play soccer when you're paying $100,000 in rent for 15 or 20 employees who could easily fit now in this space. The overall budget for this project is $2.4 million. The building renovation budget is $1.1 million. And this was prepared by Associated Builders of Hartford, working off the conceptual plans that were provided by the architect QA&M and the engineers. In addition, separate preliminary bids were provided for site work and partial roof replacement, bringing the total construction, building, and site project cost to $1.4 million. And you see there's $100,000 of roof work, and there's approximately $240,000 of site work, including paving, the connection to the sanitary sewer, which is right out front of the building, and public water. And these are contractors with whom the town of Suffield has done business several times, many times historically. So I think that there's a comfort level that I was able to achieve as people were doing their due diligence. But I will address the fact that there are, as I said in the earlier slide, there are needs to bring the building up to a condition where, when they're completed, it will be virtually as new. It will have a useful life similar to a new building. Why? Well, first of all, it's a masonry building. The roof was replaced about 10 years ago, has 20 years remaining on the roof warranty, and when we repair that small section of roof that needs repair, and the gutters and the downspouts, then the warranty will be extended to the town for the remainder of the 20 years. So when you look at a masonry building that's been entirely retrofit on the inside and on the outside, you really look at a building that for 20 or 25 years, you have every expectation will be in the same general condition as if you built a metal building somewhere on a site. And I think that's important. There's real work to be done, but at $1.4 million for essentially a 20,000 square foot building, the 10,000 foot of office space is really not a giant expense relative to what we're doing with the rest of the building. So the town has determined that the DPW property on Ffyler Place has a serious environmental problem. The cost for remediation of the problem is $750,000 estimated, as provided by the engineering firm of Fuss & O'Neill. Because the town is a responsible party, it's ineligible to receive grants or low-interest loans, as Melissa has mentioned, from the state of Connecticut or the federal EPA. Several years ago, the town wisely established a TIF district that will allow credit enhancement agreement to be negotiated with any developer within the TIF district, which in this case happens to be the downtown town center village district. TIFs are used by towns to incentivize developers to build something the town really wants to see happen, but it's otherwise unlikely to happen, and that might be to infrastructure needs, land constraints, environmental problems, or other issues that prevent development. So along with town representatives, I have met with officials from the DEP and the EPA, as well as the Connecticut Brownfields Land Bank, in order to set up the process of remediation, assuming the project is approved. Why is this important? Well, because the fallback position is that assuming that the environmental cleanup is $750,000, and assuming that there are no grants available to anybody, the worst case scenario is the new taxes generated by the development will pay for the remediation over time. It's financeable. So the other thing is, because it's a super lien position, the town's taxing authority is a super lien position. It comes before any mortgage, that it's eminently financeable once the building is built. So the developer gets back this. That's another way of saying the developer gets back. We lay out the $750,000, and as soon as the building's built, we immediately finance that out using the tax payments as the collateral and as the leverage. So that's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario, because of the work that the first selectwoman and the town planner and myself collectively have done in meeting with these parties, is that the town will be eligible for grants either from the federal EPA or the Connecticut DEP or both, or some form of subsidy, loan, something that reduces that amount of $750, so that some or all of the taxes from the first day go right into the general fund. So there's no delay. Because otherwise, frankly, until the $750 is paid off, that you're buying it off with future dollars, and this would alleviate that need. It would be a windfall for the town if there were grants available through the developer, through the Connecticut Land Bank, Environmental Land Bank. Now, we negotiated a final deal with the town where we said, look, you say it's $750, Fuss & O'Neill says it's $750. We're willing to bet that it's not more than $1.5 million. If the number were to exceed 1.5 million, when we start doing borings and we start to find out. By the way, this is after the highway garage is moved and everybody's, we have a new facility for the highway garage. But if we get to Ffyler Place and as a result of the further testing, further borings, submission of plans about what it is that we're going to do, it says, oh, this thing is $3 million. We reserve the right to then walk away. In other words, we're not taking unlimited liability. We're taking liability up to a level of $1.5 million. Now, if this is the worst case scenario for the town, it's still a better alternative than doing nothing at this point, because this will allow for the other properties that make up Ffyler Place to be developed. That can't be overstated. As Melissa said, as the Lorenos have shared many times with me and with the town, developers will not build on Ffyler Place as long as the garage is there. So now the decision as a town, as townspeople, taxpayers, is, look, we got to move the garage. The question is, what's the best way to do it? There will be those who say to build new, and we will discuss that, be happy to talk about comparable pricing. And then they'll say, wow, this is the best alternative because we're getting the most bang for the buck, which is how I tried to start this whole thing. It's really about getting the most for the taxpayer dollars. We're comfortable, by the way, building in 100% contingency, 750 to 1 million, 1.5 million, that we're comfortable with that number, and we believe that the development of upscale residential housing will in fact go forward. One last important fact. The PZC voted unanimously to allow the use of 45 upscale residential multifamily units. The actual design and development will be subject to the approval of the Design Review Board. That means that there's no bait and switch here. There's no, well, you put up a nice picture of a building and, you know, but they're going to put a tenement apartment there. No, you have a Design Review Board for a reason. It means that it's a collaborative exercise with the town planner and with that Design Review Board so that what gets built, if anything gets built, approximates, if it doesn't approximate that rendering, at least you could rest assured that it will be to the liking of the Design Review Board, not just to the liking of Kevin Casey, the developer. That's a critical, important point. You're not turning over Ffyler Place in this process to somebody who could just do whatever the hell they want. And I think it's important that everyone acknowledges that. This building is the rendering of what we have proposed to the Planning and Zoning Board and that they worked on. It contains 45 units on a combination of 4 and 3 stories, flats over flats, elevators, larger units than typical, somewhere in the vicinity of 1,150 square feet, averaging, bay windows, high ceilings, parking in the rear. You'll note the streetscape. This is consistent with what your Design Review Board has already said it wants for Ffyler Place. And I believe that if this building were built and occupied, that directly across the street behind what is now the CVS, and then towards the back lot would start to get developed because the impediment because it's been unlocked. And frankly, your downtown development is locked by the town garage's presence, and this is the opportunity for a very reasonable amount, $2.4 million, to unlock that. So with that, I'm finished. Thank you. I'm sure there'll be questions.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, folks, just to sort of repeat what has been said previously, this is a town meeting, but it's an adjourned town meeting. There's not going to be a vote this evening. It will actually be in 2 weeks. What day was it again, Melissa? 28th of this month. Okay, there'll be a referendum. opportunity to vote on this issue. However, now we have the opportunity to do two things. One, first is to ask questions of those who have made presentations and perhaps some others as well, and then subsequently to provide for commentary if there's an interest in doing that. As far as the questions are concerned, we'll begin with the questions, one question at a time. We'll give the individual the opportunity to answer, and then we'll rotate it around for other folks who may have questions as well. Once we've concluded with the questions, and I don't think we're limited in any way really on the questions, but they should be questions, not commentary. Then, following the question portion of this evening's town meeting, then we'll have commentary, which I'm going to limit to 3 minutes for starters. And again, we'll go through the audience for those who wish to speak. And once that's concluded with, if there are additional commentary by others, maybe we'll consider that. But we're going to start with, as I said to you before, we'll start with questions. There are two individuals here who are holding microphones. So if you're willing to start asking questions, I'll take the first question. Please give your name and address when you're recognized. I see somebody back here. Sorry, I can't tell who it is from this distance. Please give your name and address.
Kevin Sullivan, 1005 North Street. I need to put my glasses on. It would be a question to Mr. Casey. In regards, you singled out our town engineer report on the building. You only gave one page, but I'd like to call our attention to page 4 regarding our walls. It should be, I'm going to read it because I don't have a PowerPoint to put up that would require a computer. It should be expected that the integrity of the existing masonry wall system that has been affected by the water infiltration has a limited useful life and a load carrying capacity. It goes on to talk about a number of things, but the solutions by the engineer that you said was high quality is a new exterior metal panel or skin should be provided to ensure long-term structural integrity of these walls. No picture of that, but I'll continue down. There's another one that says the wall should be insulated in order to conform with the current state energy code requirements. You've promised us a code fully code compliant. But more importantly, this building is, let me move my PowerPoint here, but the engineer tells us on page 5 of 16, it should be noted that if the proposed future use of this building is for an essential facility, which a DPW building is, it is and is required to remain in operation after a severe weather or seismic event, the building structure will have to be upgraded to current state building code standards. And the condition of the on and reinforced masonry walls would have to be addressed. That's the entire building. Now, reflective to your last presentation, you only carry $10,000 for wall remediation for paint. It doesn't measure up, but again, please on that, tell us how you're going to do these.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question because a couple of things have happened since that engineer's first report. One is that it was determined by that same engineer and our architect that it is not qualified as an essential building. Seems kind of like you'd say, well, geez, what's an essential building? A hospital's an essential building. A public safety complex, by definition of the Connecticut Code, is a safety building, is an essential building. But it was determined by both parties that this is not an essential building, maybe contrary to what we all might think. So that meant that the upgrade to the entire building to current state code is not applicable. But you know, to your point, there are certain things that the engineer recommended that the consensus among the other engineers and the architect, and we talked about this with the town, was that he was kind of on an island about putting a metal skin on the building. We told them what he did and sort of came around to was, okay, so you're going to replace the masonry blocks on the north side of the building that have been compromised and degraded. And let me go back for a minute about that. The north roof, there's a 6-foot strip that's going to be replaced along the 300 feet of the north roof, the metal decking, and then the roofing replaced on top of it. The reason it needs to be replaced is because it was degraded by ice dams. And the reason the ice dams happened here in New England, that every single one of us knows, is because the gutter system wasn't properly maintained. It's probably the only thing on that building that wasn't really properly maintained. And there are consequences. And it wasn't maintained to the standard year in and year out. And so either from a sizing point of view of the gutters or because they just weren't properly maintained, they backed up. Ice dams happened over a course of a number of years. Remember, it was a new roof 10 years ago. And so immediately when we started to do our due diligence, we realized that that part of the roof has to be replaced. And more importantly, the gutters have to be replaced, sized properly, connected to the leaders, and we have put into the scope of work thermostatically controlled temperature controls for ice to prevent ice damming. So, what is the secondary consequence of some of those roof problems? Very limited to the immediate edge of north edge of the roof, is that somewhere in the vicinity of 20 to 30 of the masonry blocks on that entire north wall were checked and need to be replaced. So that's within the scope of work of the roofing quote that I put up there. That's not part of the painting. Obviously, we said to the engineer, if we replace these blocks and your suggested internal and external paint for the whole building, are you comfortable with that? He said, yeah, I would like a metal skin on the building. We said, okay, but our contractor, our architect, and the other engineers don't think that that's a viable or a necessary solution. So to be quite honest with you, it was a point of disagreement and one of the very few with the engineer. And, you know, we're comfortable, and I think the town should be comfortable, and because other engineers and the architect essentially take issue with it. So that's about the answer.
You didn't answer the insulation of the entire building, but it wasn't in your budget.
No. It's,
so how are you going to handle that in your
right.
budget?
It's no. First of all, the offices are completely insulated. The garage space, the warehouse space, is not insulated, and because it's not an essential building, it's not necessary to bring that up to state code. That's the information that we got from our engineer and from the town's engineer. If you think differently, then you should give the town that information, and we'd like to see it. But we can only rely on the professionals that not only we hired, but the town hired. So, thank you.
All right.
Hi, Scott Gilmartin, 759 Hale Street. Just for some context, and this isn't necessarily directed to the developer, but maybe to the first select woman or town staff. If we were to build a brand new facility, excluding unknown land costs, how much per square foot would something similar to this cost the town?
Do we have something? All right, we have something
If
here.
we have that information available.
Hold on a sec. He's looking for it. Do you know?
So for those of you who have followed this process for the last couple of years, around a year and a half to 2 years ago, probably a year and a half ago, we considered building a brand new facility at the site of the Wicks Lumber facility. And that, at that time, was going to cost $3.5 million. It was only going to have very modest office space to fit the DPW staff. It was based on that space needs study that we had. And so it was very much just what we needed. And it was $3.5 million to do that. However, I believe Mr. Casey has some additional information to share.
Do you know how to, this secondary file, to get up on that, to show the people? To get on the screen?
I do not.
Who we asked? I'm sorry.
Lisa?
We'll have some. Yep,
Okay, Lisa's on her way back.
Okay,
Why don't you summarize it before it goes up?
So, Mr. Gilmartin, to answer if I can answer your question, because I did a lot of research about this. In the last 6 or 7 years in this part of New England, meaning Massachusetts, Connecticut, So we're not talking about, far away, New York, other places. In our immediate sort of area, there have been about 10 or 11 DPW garages authorized by towns to be built new. And our architect is actually doing one of them in Cromwell right now. And a lot of people, when you start to throw numbers around, they say, well, that's a lot bigger. It's just so much bigger. It's different. It's not apples to apples. But the one way to sort of look at that is what's the per square foot price, which is what you asked. And this is a survey, and this is all public record, by the way, of towns in the last 5 or 6 years who have authorized, started to build, have built DPW facilities. And I'm sorry it's not so clear, but what you'll see is that the average cost of the average cost per square foot of a new DPW garage is about $400 a foot. So if you were to take the space needs analysis that was done by EDM for the town, they said you need 20,000 square feet. I wasn't the greatest math guy, but that's $8 million for a new garage, based on whether or not the town built it. There's absolutely all kind of factors. We could say, well, we're smarter than all those 10 towns. We can do it for $300 a foot instead of $400 a foot. But in that case, you're still looking at $6 million. There's no question that the benefit here is the fact that, let's be very frank, commercial real estate in northern Connecticut is not as valuable as it is in other places. So we have a building that when you spend $1.4 million on it, you can get it for an incredible bargain relative to if you were to build the same size building new. And that's really the long and short of it, and that's why the taxpayers will ultimately benefit from that. So just two more things. In Bloomfield right now, they're doing an addition to their DPW garage, a renovation and an addition. That project is $9.6 million to their existing garage. And in Long Meadow, some of you might be familiar with Long Meadow across the river, they are embroiled right now in a project that they started and is now at $22 million for their new DPW garage. 10 times the amount that Suffield's being asked to spend to get a garage that will be more than suitable. It will be a quantum leap ahead for the DPW. So, to answer your question, long story short, about $400 a foot.
Any additional questions? Yes, right down here.
Hello, my name is Bill Cushman. I reside at 31 Huckleberry Hollow. It was mentioned that the existing floor at 1160 South Street is not adequate for the vehicles that are intended to be parked there. How is this 6-inch addition in height going to affect the front of the building and the existing driveways and so forth, since the floor of the garage will now be 6 inches higher?
Yep, great question. So first of all, inside the building, there's 20-foot clear span height. The garage, so we could move the garage doors from the inside of the building without a problem. There's a parapet wall, a full cement parapet wall between the office space and the garage space. So whatever we do in the garage space doesn't have to be done in the office space, which is kind of important because that would sort of change everything, right? And one of the components in the $250,000 site work budget is to regrade, bring in fill, regrade. Remember, we're acquiring the 25 feet, which is essentially the tree belt of Piccolo parking, and we'll put a fence right on the border, and then that area between that and the garage will be regraded to bring up the platform, if you will, to meet the 6 inches inside. So there'll be sort of a Russo, the engineers showed me a a sort of schematic, well, they sort of described it, and it's sort of a soft grade from the building to the center of that area, and a soft grade from the back with the stormwater drainage going down the middle. So that, it's really a combination of site work. And as far as the 6 inches of reinforced cement, we were not sort of too surprised about that, because all of the engineers who looked at it came to the same conclusion independently, and we felt very comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? I think there was a question back here at the last go-round, was there? No? Okay, down here.
Kevin Goff from Thompsonville Road. Kevin, you had mentioned that the space needs study was being used as a specification for the building. There are a couple of items in the space needs study that there's a couple of items within the space needs study that don't seem to be addressed so far. Related to the 6-inch additional floor, in the space needs study, it was calling for radiant heat.
Yeah.
And I don't see that is there, so I'd like to know how that's going to be powered. Is that going to be?
You want me to answer that first?
Sure.
Okay. So I gave the in the scope of work that we proposed to the town, there wasn't radiant heat. I look at that space needs study as this is what we need, and possibly this is what we want, or you should want. This is what you need, and this is what you should want. Everybody knows that radiant heat in this type of facility would be an absolute better case scenario. It's better long term, it's more efficient, energy saving. But by that token, so are solar panels. If you're really looking at operational costs, there's a lot of ways to reduce your energy costs. But yeah, radiant heat was something that, and so because it wasn't part of our original proposal, we went to the town and said, we're happy to make a change order here, got a price, added the price to it, and to this point, it's not something that has been decided to go forward. So it's not part of the $2.4 million budget, and I'm not into change orders here, but we have presented it to the town, and it came back to us that it's a luxury that we don't think we can afford. Because remember, $3.5 million a year ago for a new building, 2 years ago, was considered by many people too much. There were people walking around town calling it the Taj Garage. Well known. People and elected officials. We don't need a Taj Garage. So now you sort of balance that with radiant heat. I also went to Melissa and said, we have a proposal that I would put solar on the roof of the building. It's perfect for it. It's perfect. It's going to add, whatever the number was, $400,000. It will benefit you over the long run. And collectively, I think the decision at the Board of Selectmen was made, we're trying to get this off of Ffyler Place. Every fight about every bell and whistle that we could possibly have is a fight that takes away from, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So I'm willing to put radiant heat in the floor. It's Kevin, to your point, it's the perfect time to do it because we're adding 6 inches of concrete, so it would be easier than it ever is otherwise. Right. Now's the time to do it, but it's a consensus of the political leaders, I think, that they want to keep this number less than $2.5 million. So that's the challenge.
The reason that I'm looking at the details of the space needs study is this is the first time I've heard it called as the specification for what we need in a new building. So what else are we picking and choosing? Second item is the cold storage. Space needs study says,
5,000 feet.
5,000 feet. I see an indication on the floor plan of approximately 1,800 feet.
Yeah.
Is that cold storage in the building? Is it outside the building?
Well, remember, that area that was designated storage on the floor plan, it assumes that all 16 bays are utilized, when in fact we only have 11 that are being utilized. So I think there's it gives the DPW an opportunity to grow if there's going to be more trucks on the road, more vehicles purchased, we know that that's not an easy thing to do. Like, we need another 2 dump trucks. It's kind of a big deal, to do that in a small town. But if there are more, we have room for more. In the interim, we certainly have plenty of room to use some of those double-stack bays as cold storage. So I think the number is probably, we might not get to 5,000, but I don't know how many they have now, and I think that whatever we give them is going to be a giant improvement over what they have. And of course, there's also there's a mezzanine loft, which is not included in the scope of work at the moment, but if the DPW felt that it pretty much, had to have some space, some extra space, there's a pretty significant amount in a mezzanine. I didn't want to get into it because elevator or ladder, I didn't want to deal with the ADA complications of that.
I guess the point of the questions is, if we had a clear specification about what was going to be delivered for the 2.4 million, it would be more comfortable going in 2 weeks to vote yes or no, because we would know almost exactly what we were getting.
Right.
We're being presented with a document that says this is the specification, and yet not all of it applies.
Well, forgive me if I said specification. I think the town, if you saw the town needs study, the architect hand drew what they, I don't know what the deal was with that, but they hand drew what they thought the thing should look like. I think that what they said was, my reading of it is, this would be ideal. And I think ultimately, to your point, we have laid out those things that we are giving you that you could check off the list. If that is 87.2% of those things, Kevin, then I think the town has a decision to make. Gosh, we're spending 2.4 million here instead of 6 million. I think maybe if we don't get 5,000 square feet of cold storage, we are getting this, and this. And those are the things that we laid out up there. The bays, the wash bay, the lifts, plenty of room for the lifts.
So forgive me for interrupting, but where can we get a clear picture to study before we go into vote?
Well, we have given you that floor plan. We have given you a list of the items, the large items that are being a part of the scope of work. But we don't have final architectural plans because we have already spent so much money on the sort of hope that this gets approved. Now, most people I've talked to are comfortable that we had to stop somewhere short of full architectural plans. Let's be honest, it's $75,000. So to satisfy you and a few other people that, I like the way this is turning up, we're going to rely on the professional architect who did a conceptual plan and told us this is going to give you virtually all that you need.
So we're going to be deciding to either buy or not buy, and hope that what's delivered is what's been presented. No. See, that's great that you put it that way, because if you're not, when we have a contract, if we say that we're putting 9 overhead doors in the building and we put 6, then the check is not going to get signed from the town of Suffield to the developer. If we say we're putting 6 inches of reinforced concrete on the floor with floor drains and oil and grease traps and separators, and we put 4 inches of concrete, then the check's not getting written. The risk is here. There's no risk to the town. So I think that's one of the nicest parts of this whole deal.
I don't know if I've made this point clear in this current presentation. It's been made in other forums, that there are a lot of checks and balances built into this process. What we will be voting on at the referendum is to authorize me to move forward in entering into a contract. You'll be authorizing me to hire construction lawyers to represent us, to make sure that we are covered, that we understand what we're asking for, and that at the end of the day, we will be hiring third-party inspectors, similar to what you would do if you were purchasing a home, to go and inspect this building and make sure that it satisfies all building code requirements, delivers exactly what we're expecting. And if it does not, we are not obligated to purchase that building. And so I think that's a very, very important point. And will I be making these decisions by myself? Absolutely not. I am certainly not an architect or an engineer. The town officials will be involved at every step of the process that we are involved in. And so I want that to be perfectly clear. One of the important points as well is that we are the entity that has the building official. So through the permitting process, our town building official will be authorizing the process and making sure that the building code is complied with. And so I think that it is very much worth recognizing that there are a lot of checks and balances built into this process. So you are just voting to move forward. The deal could then fall apart at any step of the way if things are not done exactly the way we want them. And again, the developer is taking all of the risk, because if he does this building and he renovates it and it doesn't suit us, he's stuck with it. And he then has to figure out an alternative use for it. So that's why I feel comfortable that, that we will make sure that we are protected.
Kevin.
Okay.
Kevin, are you done?
One last thing.
Okay, good.
However, Melissa, and I want, in the interest of candor, don't take that to mean that we're going to be anything but diligent in how we negotiate that contract. So it's not like, well, good luck, I'm taking a $2.4 million risk here. No, we're going to work out every one of those details in the contract deal, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, we are hiring construction lawyers. I've been working with Shipman and Goodwin, their construction department, and it goes, I'll say, I've been a business and tax lawyer for 20 years. I am not going to allow this to happen where we are not well protected. You can have my word on that.
All righty, so that we'll ask some more questions. Warren Packard, right down here. Then I'll come back over here. And Warren, just Kevin's back and forth sort of illustrates a point. Please ask one question, and then we'll move on to other people. If we need more questions from you or from Kevin, we'll come back to you.
But I have a 3-page list.
Oh, just one at a time.
There's a lot of hope and a lot of optimism involved in this. I see this as 2 projects, quite frankly, and not one. There's the matter of moving the garage, of which I have no question at the moment, but I do have a question relative to the developer. Have we decided upon one? Mr. Casey has been referred to a number of times tonight and previously as a developer. I went on the internet and looked up the Patterson Millennium Group, which lists Kevin Casey as, quote, founder and managing partner. The company itself is a startup company registered through a bank in Delaware. I'm getting to a question, by the way, Ed. The company, quote, specializes in raising capital, equity, and debt, and managing investments in the short and long term, strategically positioning them for disposition or preservation. There is no mention of real estate or any other kind of development. My question is, have we named yet a developer for this project, and do we know anything about them, their financial background, and what comfort do we have that we're moving forward with somebody who is able to carry out their commitments?
Thank you, Mr. Packard. I'm really glad that's what the internet said, because that's exactly what I have built over 20 years is an early stage development company, which is different from a builder developer. We all know the builder developers. They go in, they're the guys that build the thing from the ground up. What I've been able to do, and pretty successfully over the last 15 to 20 years, is to use capital from independent sources, private sources, to acquire property. In some cases, fund a startup operating company, one in California, which is really one of the more successful financial literacy companies in America. And I think there are people here who can actually attest to that. And use capital to essentially solve problems, to look at a situation where somebody saw, gosh, there's not a good solution to this land, or in almost all cases it's land, and to work with planning and zoning departments and to work with town planners, which I've done throughout New England, and to come up with a higher and better use. And then, when successful, we have created value. And most recently in Rhode Island, we had a partner and I, a financial partner and I, had purchased 120 acres, and we proposed and got approved a master plan for 120 active adult senior houses, and the market really wasn't there. It took about 3 years to get that approval, which is what I do. Early stage development, it's not fun. There's a lot of meetings just like this, where you're standing in front of a town and you're making the pitch as to why what your vision is and what your idea is the best way to go. And we got that approved, and then the market really didn't justify it by the time it took so long to get it approved. So we pivoted, and that property is now going to be the second largest solar development farm in New England. So it's really about the use of capital and trying to unlock problems, and that's what I do. And finally, I will say this. I've already been in discussions with local builders here, well known to all of you, about partnering if and when this project goes forward and the 45 units are approved finally on Ffyler Place. I'm not hammering any nails. I never have. That's not what this is about. It's really just about the creation of value, taking somebody else's problem and trying to find a solution.
So we don't have a developer yet?
No, but
Well, yes or no?
no.
Simple question.
No, not a builder developer, no.
Okay.
There's different kinds of development.
All righty, another question? Yes, sir, right next to Kevin Goff there. Name and address, please.
Marty Page, Pool Road. I have two questions, basically relate to the same subject. With these 44 units, or 45 units that you're putting in, the hookup costs to the wastewater treatment plant will be borne by the developer?
Yes.
And my other question is, are we going to have any issues with the capacity of the plant that exists if that's developed, or the balance of the other 21 acres that you talk about?
Hey, Marty, that's a great question as to relative to the other 21 acres. But yes, first answer to your question is yes, typical development, the builder developer absorbs the cost of the hookup. You know, sometimes it's negotiated. There'd be no real compelling reason, I don't think, to negotiate a special deal here. It's just built into the cost of construction and development of the site for the hookup. Relative to the 21 acres and the further development of Ffyler Place, boy, that's a loaded question. If it were in fact fully developed the way the town has always said it wanted it to be developed, then I don't know the WPCA limitations. It's certainly 145 apartment unit or condo unit is not going to put it over the top. But to your larger question, they would have to decide ultimately. That's an integrated decision, planning and zoning, you know, everybody, WPCA, this is what we need. We have to upgrade the plant. We have to make it an upgrade. How that works, that's, you know, that would be a nice problem to have if the town has to sort of work on that, you know, because the development is ensuing, I think.
Yes, sir, right down here.
Ted Keys, Marvin Drive. So when you talk about grants or brownfield monies, any estimates on what that entails? $10,000 or hundreds of thousands of dollars?
Thank you for the question. I do know at this point that the Connecticut Brownfields Land Bank was looking at a $3 million grant from the state of Connecticut. In addition, they have some other funding. So they are the entity that is able to apply for and get these types of grants. And again, we have already preliminarily vetted this project with them, and they're interested. They're just waiting for us to move forward, and then we will move forward with them.
Any estimates on what kind of dollars those are? $10,000 or?
No, if we could apply for the entire amount, the entire 727,000 estimate that we have now. Again, what they would do is they would go in and they would spend some of their money to make sure that our estimates are accurate, make sure that nothing was missed in the phase 1, 2, and 3 and Fuss and O'Neill's remediation plan, making sure that that's accurate. I feel like it probably is pretty accurate. Fuss and O'Neill is very reputable. Phase 1, 2, and 3 and remediation plan, we should be almost there. But if there's anything missing, they have the funds to be able to figure that out, and then they will assist with us in getting those grants. And from what they've said, there is money for this type of development. This is what DEEP is focused on, the Connecticut the federal EPA, et cetera. They want to see these sites put into productive use for towns.
Yes, all the way in the back, green jacket.
My name is Jim Sheridan, 1390 North Grand Street. I want to protest the way this meeting is being held here tonight. There's nobody had an opportunity to have an opposition point. All the questions are asked as though this is a foregone conclusion that we're going to go ahead and do this. I mean, I think in order to do this properly, if you get up there, you had this project going for a year or so, and you come over here and you tell me that I got 2 minutes or 3 minutes to protest what you guys are telling me. I think there should be somebody here with an opposing view that's given the same amount of time as you guys had to present your case. And I came here tonight to give you a little bit of a historical review of the town of Suffield and the past faux pas that they have pulled.
Hey, Jim,
and I'm talking serious money here.
Jim, do you have a question? That's what this part is.
That's one way of shutting me up. I got to have a question, right?
No? Do you have a question?
Yeah. You're gonna have all these people here get up and leave before we get a chance to protest what we want to say.
No, we're going to give you the opportunity.
You're not going to do nothing of the sort. This is a tactic of you guys. Don't give me that crap.
Come on, Jim.
Come on yourself.
Let's go with what I had outlined. We're going to ask some other questions and then we'll come back to you.
Yeah. Do you notice how everybody's leaving? You notice how everybody's walking out?
No.
And the people that want to make their point are not going to get a chance to make their point?
Jim, come on. Let's let some other people ask questions.
It's your tactic. This is the way you guys have run to this town meeting. I've been coming to these town meetings for 60 years. And every single time, it's the same scenario. It's exactly this. Oh, it's going to be the best thing since white sliced bread. And it always turns out to be a disaster.
Okay.
And I've got a number of those disasters that I can tell you people about here tonight if you've been here long enough. I've been in this town all my life. I've been coming to these town meetings for 60 years. Probably most of you people ain't even old enough to remember that.
Jim, let's ask some more questions, and then you can make your comments.
Let's ask questions until everybody leaves.
Look at all these people want to stay and hear the questions. Any other questions? There were some other hands down here. Yes, you, sir. Is that Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Let's give somebody else a chance. Are there any other questions? Then we'll come back to you, Mr. Sullivan. Right here.
Good evening, Don Miner, Mapleton Avenue. As I read this thing and listen to the discussion, every first selectman for the last, 7 or 8 at least, has been suggesting we should do something about this. And there's some great aesthetics and all, but my question is, if I read the numbers, even if we get somebody else to pay for the brownfield remediation, we're still talking roughly $2.4 million. And I look at the tax revenue that would be generated by this as a maximum of $180,000. Now, there may be some additional if we get some other property developed through this, but $180,000 on a $2.4 million investment sounds like about a 13-year payback. That's fairly long. What is the expectation of additional revenue, and how much would that shorten the payback period? Because I know in my business, anything over 4 years is questionable.
I think that's the first selectman can address that.
Thank you, dear. Well, first of all, I just want to mention that those numbers are estimates, so everybody to recognize they're not hard, fast numbers. They're for illustrative purposes. But you're right. The payback period will take some time. However, right now, we're getting nothing. We could sit here and continue to get nothing. The the long-term investment, this is, as I mentioned, this is an investment in economic development. It is not a highway garage project. It is an economic development program. We have had budgets in our economic development operating budget for years. They were always over $100,000 or so. And what did we get for them? Employee time, hard work, etc. Now we're asking to really commit to investing in economic development and to giving the world, the other developers out there, the message that Suffield wants you to come and invest in our town. And we're hoping you'll do so on the remaining property owned by the Lorenos in the rest of the Town Center Village District. What's that also going to serve as a catalyst for? Across the street. You'll notice that the old CVS has been vacant for years now. Why? Because there's no density in the Town Center Village District. This will bring 45 units with the people that come with it to provide a little more vibrancy and density in the Town Center Village District. We could do nothing and keep the status quo, but I'm not kidding when I tell you that it is getting more and more difficult to get money from the state of Connecticut. No matter what budget I come in with at this budget process, it is going to be an increase. Why? Because we are bound by contractual obligations, whether it be health benefits for our town employees, whether it be contractual increases, et cetera, et cetera. There are things that we cannot control that we will be subject to as a town. One thing we can do is to try to diversify our tax base. And this is one way that frankly has very little risk to the taxpayers. As I mentioned, if everything goes wrong in this deal and somehow we go forward and we don't get one more dollar of tax revenue, we can absorb this through the debt service that is currently being reduced by getting closer to the high school bond falling off. Our reduction is over $283,000 in this upcoming fiscal year. We could absorb this without $1 increase to your taxes. But you're right. Is there zero risk? No. There's never zero risk. But this is very low risk, and we're hoping that there will be unlimited upside by the development that is unlocked in our town center.
Mel Chaffetz?
Hi, Mel Chaffetz, 803 Mapleton. Just some simple questions. What is the taxes that we get on the existing building on South Street? What's the revenue from that?
Do you know?
It's not on any of the information. What do we collect now on taxes on South Street?
It's $28,000 a year.
Okay, so that's not included on any of the information we have here. Okay.
Well, wait a minute. What?
You also said, Kevin, if I could ask you, that it's $1.4 million you're going to put into developing and renovating.
That's the budget, yes.
That's your budget, 1.4, and you're charging us 2.4.
Yes, because Danny's not giving me the building for free.
So we're paying $1 million for this building, correct? You're giving you $1 million profit. Okay, you're gonna, but it's costing us.
No.
Well, didn't you just say it's 2.4?
I have to buy the building first.
Well, I'm just asking. You said there was 2.4. I'm sorry, 1.4 in terms of renovation.
Construction, right?
Okay.
Yeah, renovation. But Danny Carstens is the owner of the building, one of them right here. He's not doing the construction. I have to buy the building first, Mel. And I'm buying the building and putting $1.4 million. I thought that was clear, but I apologize if it was unclear.
Okay. In the building, all right, I didn't hear that. In the building, it's really going to cost the town $3.1 million with the bond costs on top of the 2.4. Another $700,000.
No, as a matter of fact, at one of the Board of Finance meetings, and I was very intrigued by this, I think it was Mr. Childs who said, we may choose not, if this goes forward, we may choose not to bond this. We may take this out of that fund.
That's true, but that's not what it says in the packet. The packet says that
ultimately the Board of Finance will decide the best way that they want to pay for it, I would think, right?
The packet is, as I mentioned, for illustrative purposes. One way to do this is to finance it, which is sometimes a preferred method.
But I can only go by what you have here.
Correct. We could pay $2.4 million out of the capital non-recurring fund today, or our
But you didn't, but
general
that's not
fund.
what you're saying here. And here, you're just saying that
Correct.
you're
That
going to bond.
perhaps we would bond it, and if we
Okay.
did, I was very honest that it'll cost you another $1 million. However, that debt service could be paid out of the TIF, which will be new income and new revenue, new tax revenue that we don't have today. So yeah, we could make it so it's all gravy, and we get every first dollar of tax revenue back into service for the town by paying outright, and that ultimately will be a decision of the Board of Finance.
Since you're standing there, Melissa, what's it going to cost for the development of the road to extend it?
We are estimating that the development of the road will be $100,000. Now, those costs can be borne a couple of different ways. They can go through regular pavement management in our operating budget. We could
But-
put it in next year's budget, or we could pay it out of the tax increment financing district as well, because expenses that are in the district or outside of the district that are helping in making the development of the district can be borne by the TIF. So again, if we choose to pay ourselves back for whatever the cost is to put in that extended road through the town's easement to unlock our subdivided back portions for economic development purposes, we can do that through the TIF as
So
well.
it's really 2.5 then for this project?
You can look at it as 2.5, but
Well, it's
Mr.
another
Casey,
100,000. That's
Miss-
what you're saying. It's
hold on.
$100,000 for the road. The other question I have
hold on,
is
hold on.
regarding, well, let me finish.
No, you did finish. Mr.
I-
Casey is
you
getting
don't know I
2.4
finished.
million. Mr. Casey will only be getting 2.4 million, and this is a point worth making. No matter what it costs to get us the building that we have asked for, that's on him. We don't pay a penny more. But
But
go ahead.
that's still costing us $100,000 for the town to put that extension on the road.
That's correct.
However we pay for it. What's it costing us to do the third, you mentioned that we're going to hire third parties, experts to look at this plans. What's that costing us?
I don't know, but I do have a fund that was set up by the Board of Finance to do this type of due diligence of $50,000. So I
Okay.
have a pot of money already to make sure that
All right,
we
so
are
it's a-
represented.
So it's really another $150,000 on what we've seen so far.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions, Mel?
Last one, how old is this building on South Street?
I don't know.
I believe it was Gene Longo's building, right? People told me that. I think it was built in 1980.
I'm sorry?
1980.
So it's 40 years old?
Yes. But
And
the
what's
system-
the existing highway department age?
However, unlike the existing highway garage now, the systems were all replaced within the last 10 years, including the roof and the HVAC systems. So I don't think if your point is it's not that far off from the garage, and nobody's proposing to spend $1.4 million in the current garage to bring it up to any useful life equivalency. Right, so, one
What's
thing
the existing, we don't need to hear anymore, I'm just asking
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
What's the existing highway department age?
It's 19.
1974.
74?
Yeah.
So they're pretty close in age, okay.
Right.
Here.
That's it.
Right. One thing, though, to your point about the expenditures, Melissa and I both touched on, I believe, the fact that the existing town garage needs $550,000 to essentially continue to be usable for very much longer. So that's something I think everybody should factor in, whether or not you really want to put the $100 into the $20 watch. But I tried to make that point. So you could, using the kind of math that you were using, Mel, you could say, well, take the 550 off the 2.4 because you had to spend that anyway. So, I mean,
Yes, ma'am, with the blue coat.
Sarah to Shannon, 70 Rosewood Drive. So I'm totally new to town. We just moved to Connecticut 6 weeks ago from Illinois. This is my first town meeting. I'm sorry I don't have 60 years.
Welcome.
Thank you. I find this fascinating and wish I had popcorn. So I find this really interesting, and I see that this really is a benefit to the town. I came from a community that would be more classified like Enfield. I feel like I live in the middle of nowhere. It's very beautiful, so please don't, but it's different. So I find this really interesting. some of the things that we are saying from both prospects for this 45-unit building that they want to present. One question I had, and maybe I missed it, is it just primarily going to be apartments/condos? Is it going to be mixed units on the bottom? And then the owner that is across the street from behind CVS, that it just looks like it's an empty buildings right now, at least from what I can see. Have we spoken to that owner and talked to him about maybe prospects already and maybe coming together and already raising his building and going and building something all at the same time?
Want me to answer?
Yeah, just do what's in the building.
Yeah, our proposal is for exclusively housing. But we did that sort of in conjunction with the Planning and Zoning Board in the last 6 months, because they realized with the town planner that there needed to be some sort of an impetus to continue with the kind of commercial retail development, and until you get the garage down, and until the market for commercial development is not as robust as we believe it is for residential. We have spoken to the Lorenos. The town has spoken to the owners of that property for years and years and years and years. They've said the exact same thing. We are blocked by the garage. All the people who have come to us with ideas say, when's that garage going? And as soon as it goes, we really feel strongly, this is a very important point that you bring up. Everybody needs to understand this. We feel very strongly that this will unlock the rest of that development. Now, what form that takes, I don't own that property. The town doesn't own that property. But the town will have a big say in what happens there, just on the basis of the way that the Suffield is set up, you know.
All right, now, this lady in the blue here, do you still have a question? No, ma'am, you're done with the questions. Are there any other questions? Okay, I think we're going back to wait a minute, we have one over here, and then we'll come back to you, Mr. Sullivan. I want to give everybody an opportunity to ask their questions for the first time. Please identify yourself and your address.
Hello, Brendan Malone, 104 3rd Street. My question could be answered by Melissa. First of all, I believe that the Lorenos can't subdivide until Ffyler Place is made a public road. Is there a timeline in place where we can expect that to happen?
Not unless this deal goes forward. So never. That's when you think about that piece, there might be some opportunities for the developer and the Lorenos to participate in the expense associated with turning it into a town road. So those are types of things that will be negotiated with them should they choose to develop their parcel. However, nothing's going to happen if we never move the highway garage. So.
All right, looks like, I guess, Mr. Sullivan, you're it. I don't think we have any other questions. No, we do have questions. I'm sorry. Over here, we've got some questions over here before we get back to Mr. Sullivan.
Just a quick one. Carolyn Dostrike from South Main Street.
You're coming with a microphone, Carolyn.
Good evening. I'm Carolyn Dotrep from South Main Street. I'm wondering whether you've considered moving the cell tower. I would think as a developer, especially for a residential district, that they would be concerned about the health effects of a cell tower.
Mrs. Dotrep, that is a good question. It's been asked a few times, and the answer is, first of all, the town is contractually bound. That cell phone's not going anywhere based on the contractual financial deal that was made, which has really benefited the town in a big way. But to your point, we had to seriously think about that because there is anecdotal thought that, but far from scientifically proven that proximity to cell towers causes long-term problems. Frankly, we have situated the building on the site as far to the north as really possible. That's mostly because we want to use we don't want the cell phone to be part of our program, the cell phone tower to be part of the program, right? So the answer to your question is, if you drive into Boston or New York or even in Springfield, they're on buildings where people live. They're in church steeples. As a society, I think we have to decide, but it's really not going to block the economic development of Ffyler Place. And it would be sad if it did. And finally, I'll just say this. My understanding of technology is that in 5 to 10 years, it may be replaced by relays, on telephone poles. That, from what we understand, that technology is not, really long term. There's probably different solutions with 5G and things going on. So I don't have a great answer except to say you weigh it all and you say, try and stay as far away from it as we can. We're not putting it on the building. There are developers who say, I can get money for this. I'm going to put it on my building. We're not doing that. I think it's probably as close to Gloria's house as it will be to most of the people who live in this development, probably,
All right, are there any? Yes, Etienne Dotrep. And then back here, I think I see a hand up there. So Etienne, you had your hand up?
Etienne Dotrep, 264 South Main. Is there any possibility to have a better estimate of the environmental remediation at Ffyler Place? So we know that we're not going to go to $3 million. We have been already through with Kent Memorial. We don't want to repeat the same story with Ffyler Place.
Sure.
Yeah. Etienne, great question. And what we've essentially done here is said the town knows that it's 750, some number like that. I've talked to Melissa at great length about this. They have relied on Fuss and O'Neill to continually update that number, and they're very comfortable with what that number is. However, if something further develops, what we're basically saying is that site could be covered over, encapsulated, without the complete remediation, without the complete, starting from square one, because it's the use of a property subsequently that almost always, generates how much you have to do. So they know that their liability is 750. By the way, that's not my liability. It's the taxpayer's liability. It's sitting there at 750. We've proposed to take away that liability up to 1.5 million. So we look at that as a kind of a bonus to the town, that if it's more than that, if it's beyond that, then the town will have issues that have nothing to do with me, right? I mean, it's just that's the problem. But I think the fallback position here is that if we don't build that complex, then it'll be a parking lot or a green space. Pardon the language, a green space is, you don't think of it as that, but and that will in fact still facilitate the rest of the development. The answer to your question is, I don't think anybody's contemplated, a number bigger than 1.5 million, and we won't know that until we start testing it.
Okay, this gentleman in the back, and then we'll go to Mr. Sullivan, and I think that's about it for the questions, then we'll go on to comments. So, sir, what's your question?
All right, Tom Belmore, 1031 Mountain Road.
No, I didn't see it, Tom. My eyesight's not so good anymore.
Yeah, I can see you.
Good.
I have a question on, you're talking about the storage, and you showed the picture of the building with the 5 or 6 dump trucks in it, and then the 5 or 6 littler dump trucks. My question is, where are you going to put all the other equipment that the highway department has, such as the trailers? They've got mowing machines, the bigger tractors, and also the construction material, like your gravels, your stone,
yep.
Your loam, your pipes, all that. They have a lot of stuff down there, and it doesn't look like you have any area. We're going from a 3.5 acre lot that doesn't hold it all now, and we're going to put it on a 1.96 acre lot, and the building's bigger.
Yep, it's a good question. First of all, when you mentioned the mowers and such, that is what the cold storage is. Oh, this is yours? I'm sorry, I apologize. So the acreage that we're acquiring, here you go, is to the rear of the building. The majority of it's to the rear of the building back there, right? And that's about 1.25 acres of land. And not only will the salt shed be back there, but the materials storage will be back there. And what we like about that is, I mean, most people don't care about aesthetics when it comes to a DPW garage, but it's kind of nice, the idea that still driving up and down Route 75, the entrance to town, all the sort of the working end of the stick is going to be back here. And so we think there's plenty of room back there. We've talked about it with the DPW guys for all their storage material, outside, materials, as you said, as you mentioned, back here configured on that already paved piece. And then really basically, you're back to the same question of, 5,000 square feet of cold storage. We think that the real amount right now is about 3,500 to 4,000. And I think ultimately the taxpayers have to decide, do they want that, which is not half a loaf, it's not that big of a compromise, or they want to spend $6 million and build what EDM said would be the perfect thing. I mean, I think that's really the question here. What is the highest and best use of the taxpayers' money, right? And I think that if they will have, I think if you ask Mr. Servione, I think he would tell you that in that building they will have plenty of room for their seasonal equipment. There's just a lot of room in there, in excess of the bays. So that's the best answer I can give you.
Mr. Sullivan, you still have a question?
I have 31 of them, but they won't get answered this evening.
Yeah, I'm afraid not.
So, Mr. Casey, this is for you.
Yep.
I think you skipped a point. You didn't mention land acquisition. This is my question, but because we do not know we're online, we get no spreadsheets, we get no money sheets, we get no cost. You represented to us you're paying $300,000 for 1.5 acres, correct? And
Yes.
that's all it.
Yes.
You should get a better appraiser. We sold as a town 1.4 acres next door for $77,000 in 2018. So.
Want me to answer that?
No, I'm just, my
No,
question is this.
you brought it up.
You didn't tell everyone your costs.
No, you brought it up, and I'll
Yep.
answer it. I probably should get a better appraiser. I found in life that when you need something, you better not want it, and when you want something, you better not need it. And, in this case, we needed that parcel, and since you brought it up, I'll tell you there's a very important consideration here, and the planning and zoning people know that. I see Mrs. Bromage over there. When we made that deal and made that transaction, the only way that Piccolo's was selling us that property was not only for the $300,000, but for the fact that it was going to be subject to their getting approved to expand their business. As a result of that expansion, the town of Suffield's probably looking at somewhere around $125,000 to $150,000 a year of new taxes. Nobody's talking about that. That doesn't happen. And correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, you were in the middle of all that. Does that happen if this deal wasn't proposed? No, it does not. Okay, so I want everybody to understand that was, I see people who I think do understand that was actually a 10 strike for the town of Suffield. So I'm proud of that. I'm very happy that the town is going to benefit to that extent. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Salt shed. You have $150,000 in the budget.
Right.
Because you've indicated you're broke, I brought you the prints of the salt shed we own. You have represented that we will get like, kind, or better. The cost of this salt shed.
$450,000.
Correct.
Right.
And at an accelerated cost today, because I brought you the prints because I hate to see you broke.
No, I know the prints.
It'll be about $740,000 to $800,000. How does that fit in your budget?
We are not building that salt shed, and that's been well known to everybody from the first minute we started. As a matter of fact, Mr. Servione could probably speak to this. He and I together looked at what would be a viable replacement. We went through the entire laundry list of product that is out there, and the number of 150,000 was something that the DPW fellows said, this is sufficient for our needs. how and why that salt shed was built 12 years ago or whatever. It's probably the biggest salt shed in New England. It was a beautiful building, no question about it. But the question is, do you think the town needs to build the exact same one? And no, I didn't say like, kind, and quality for every single thing, but if you're going to take an example of something that's not like, kind, and quality, take an example of the fact that there's no ventilation in the building, there's no fire suppression in the building, so there's a lot of things in the building that are going to be a lot better than like, kind, and quality. So to pick on one when we have an agreed upon scope of work with the DPW, I appreciate your opinion, but their opinion matters more to me.
We've never been shared the scope, so just so you know, I go to the website, we were promised all this information. So whether you've got your spiel with your adjectives, I deal in verbs and nouns. We're here tonight, none of this is online. We have no reports from the building department tonight. We have no reports from the PBC tonight. We have no reports from, wait a minute, let me finish. No reports from fire marshals. We have all these agencies in town. There's not a single report for a taxpayer. I'm not going to trust you. You're not going to trust me. That's not our role. We pay as taxpayers. We have numerous departments. This has been ongoing for a year. There is no formal interpretation of any of the documents, which are always a moving target with you, and different sayings with you. So you think the salt shed's awesome because you gave a presentation just the other day with the realtors that you're going to put parking in there. So we still need that.
Yeah.
So I'm done. I'm done.
Well, do I get to answer the
Is there a
question?
question?
I'm done.
Okay, good enough. Now we'll move on to comments. We'll move on to comments. 3 minutes. You have a question? All right.
So I am really confused over the status of Ffyler Place as a road. And I apologize, Kevin Goff on Thompsonville Road. Can somebody explain to me, is that a road? Is it a driveway? Is it a shared space? Who owns it? What do we have to do to change it from what it is into a developable?
Come on, Jerry. Jerry Turbot, town engineer.
30 years with the
Yay, Jerry.
So I hope I give a good answer, I guess, right? Ffyler Place is the first part of it is half owned by the town, and it's half owned by Lorino Associates. So you could draw a line down the middle of the road, I think probably to where you get to I believe by the tower and the dog pound. And after that, then Lorino owns the entire road beyond that. There's a right to pass for each party on the others, and I believe that right also had the right for successors and assigns, I guess, if one was sold or given away. I know we did check on that, so that's what that is. It's not a town road. It's a shared road, actually. To be a town road, it would have to go through the acceptance process. It would actually go to a town meeting for acceptance as a town road. And that hasn't happened, so it is a shared road.
Yep. Next. Let him get the microphone there, Marty.
Marty Page from Pool Road. Kevin, you mentioned the aesthetics as we drive into the town of Suffield. In all of your meetings with planning and zoning, have the requirements of buffer between the new property that you're establishing by moving that property line to the south and essentially eliminating the entire greenway there to allow the trucks to come out, are we setting a precedent of no buffers in a parking area, industrial zone, commercial zone?
Well, first of all, let me get this thing here. The acquisition of land doesn't start until a little bit farther back here. So this entire island, just from an aesthetic point of view, if that's where you started with, that whole landscaped island remains the same. So we start behind that island, and to answer your question, the Planning and Zoning Board will ultimately have a say about what we have to do on the boundary line. But we have enough room, and we have now demonstrated that we have enough room, not only from our architects and our engineers, but in the field, that we have probably 17 feet of excess space from the turning radius of the massive trucks, and about 12 feet from the largest truck, which is never supposed to be there anyway because it's going to be on the back of the building. So we can create a some sort of a minimal tree belt or natural screening if the Planning and Zoning Board tells us, or Piccolo, they have to do it. It might be Piccolo's.
Historically, the minimum is not what happens.
Yeah, I talked to Bill about that. I remember we talked about it, and we looked at the big picture and whether or not in commercial properties that's the same as, it's certainly far different from obviously residential, but we'll work with it, whatever the town, says they have to do. And Piccolo look, they got a lot of property and they're getting a lot of money from us. So if they have to bump in, 10 feet into their thing and we have to give them 2 and that still works, that's how it'll work out. We'll have to do whatever's approved by the Planning and Zoning Board.
All right, now we'll have, oh, yes, ma'am. I guess we have another question. Is that a question? Yes. All right.
Beth Chaffetz, 803 Mapleton Avenue. I will have to say that after 35 years in town, it's disappointing to be at a town meeting and not have an opportunity to vote. So that's just a comment at the end. But I would ask, and maybe this is a Derek question, that with the referendum coming up in 2 weeks, I guess, for this idea, this project, which has obviously had a lot of time and effort put into it. My expectation as a citizen, voting citizen of the town, is that regardless of the outcome of the referendum, whether it's up or down, that we can expect administration to honor the vote of the citizens of that referendum. Is that an expectation we should expect?
So this particular type of referendum is an adjourned town meeting.
Right.
The Board of Selectmen set this town meeting in advance, which they can do pursuant to the Connecticut General Statutes, providing notice from the meeting that these questions would be adjourned to a referendum.
So, I understand that, yeah.
The vote at referendum is essentially the same as what the vote would be had that vote occurred at the town meeting.
Right.
It just provides it to a broader audience. So this, again, would be the vote of the town meeting essentially vote of the referendum rather, carries the same weight had this been voted out of the town meeting.
Exactly, but the expectation is that the choice that the town makes would be honored.
As any vote at town meeting and referendum. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you.
All right. Are we done with questions? Yes, over here.
Bill Cushman, I reside at 31 Huckleberry Hollow. There was an article in a local publication recently which indicated there was a 3-board meeting, one being the Board of Finance, who took a vote on this very subject, and there was a tie. A tie, according to most rules of order, is a no vote. So I went and looked at the meeting minutes available for the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance. I cannot find out how that no vote allowed the same subject to be being discussed here. So could someone enlighten me how this happened?
Yes, thank you for asking the question. So we had a tri-board meeting of the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the Permanent Building Commission on November 6th of 2019. The subject of the meeting was to consider a very narrow scope. Both boards had already approved the project to move forward. And you could see back in the numerous meetings that we've had prior to that. Subject to a contingency that a certified engineer came forward with an opinion that after remediation and, renovation of 1160 South Street, it would be suitable as a town garage. So despite that very narrow scope of our meeting, the meeting kind of went in a lot of different directions and went down the road of litigating, for lack of a better term, the merits of the project. That's not what we were there to do. We were there to decide, each board individually, whether or not we had received such opinion of an expert to allow us to move to the next step, which would be town meeting. So the Board of Finance went first, and they decided that they did not receive what would have allowed us to move forward. Again, the discussion really went into areas that were not the subject of that decision. So we adjourned. We were done. We couldn't move forward unless all of the boards had decided, well, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance had both decided that it met it. So the developer went out and did more work and came back with additional letters that we then decided he brought back to us. The Board of Selectmen went first. We reviewed these new submissions, decided that it did meet what was asked for. We referred it to the Board of Finance. They reviewed the new information that he provided and decided that at that time they were comfortable moving to this next step. And so there's been some accusations out there that despite the no vote of the Board of Finance, that somehow we steamrolled this project through. Nowhere did we tell the developer, and frankly, would we tell a developer who has been this forthcoming with information and jumped through every single hoop we have required of him, that he only had one bite at the apple. He could have chosen to say, I'm done, I'm out, I'm done with this town, it's too hard, and move on. But instead, he stuck with it. He brought us some additional information, and we are comfortable with our checks and balances that we are now at the town meeting step. And so that's how we got here. The Board of Selectmen chose that rather than taking a vote here, that we wanted to really make sure that the entire town has an opportunity to weigh in on this very important question. So now, one of the reasons we did it is because we know that this is an extraordinarily well-attended town meeting. A typical town meeting has about 20 people, and I could name the people way earlier than the town meeting is convened, which I appreciate those people being so dedicated to our municipal process. However, we want this to be a decision of the broader base. And so we decided that regardless of what the vote was, whether it was a yes or a no, that we were going to move it forward. One of the other reasons we did that is because we didn't want it to have any perception that maybe if it was a no at this town meeting, that we only decided to move forward because it was a no and that's what we wanted. Or if it had been a yes, we only decided to move forward because maybe we wanted it to be a no. So we took that out of the equation. The other piece that I've heard is that people won't be informed because they're not here, because there was a disincentive to attend this meeting. So the way we're combating that is that we are taping this meeting. We are going to put it on our website. We're going to blast it all over social media, etc. So anyone who wants to be informed has the opportunity to do so. On the town website currently is every presentation we have given on this subject for the last year and a half, including every single set of meetings with, at least on the Board of Selectmen side and the Board of Finance side, very detailed discussion of a lot of the issues that have been brought up this evening. What the developer chooses to publicize in his forums, which I believe is going to have a website that has some information, that's his choice. This deal is very different than typical ways that we have done business in the past. This is going to be a turnkey project. The town of Suffield is not going to be managing this process through the the Permanent Building Commission. It is going to be, again, a turnkey, where we say to the developer, if you build what we want, we'll buy it. If you don't, we won't. And so that, I know, is a very different model than we're used to and takes some getting used to. And so the level of scrutiny by going through all of our boards and commissions it's not going to happen until the end, until we decide whether or not we want to buy that property, and we will be relying on our paid experts, people who are putting their malpractice insurance and their professional names and liability on the line because they represent the town of Suffield and only the town of Suffield.
Okay, now we'll take comments. Do we have any comments? We're going to limit them to 3 minutes apiece. Brian Bannock.
Brian Bannock, 992 Mapleton Avenue. I'm in favor of the relocation of the town garage to 1160 South Street for 3 reasons. The relocation of the town garage will remove a major impediment to the sale and development of Ffyler Place. Once Ffyler Place is fully developed, the town will see a substantial increase in revenue. The 45 apartments that are proposed for the current town center garage site will lead to a new vitality in the town center, further increasing revenue to the town, and the liability of owning a contaminated piece of property will be removed from the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Jim Sheridan left, so I guess we'll have to have somebody else. Mr. Sullivan? Oh, sure. Three minutes, Mr. Sullivan.
I'm well aware. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quickly, I question, and I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but there is no 44 Ffyler Place. That's an imaginary title. When we're looking to transfer town property, we would have to reference, it's either, the cards in the town hall show it's either Rear Depot or it's 157 Mountain Road. So it's just a technical point. I'm sure I'll be told I'm stupid, but there is no 44 Ffyler Place. There's Rear Depot or there's 157 Mountain Road. So I don't know how we're transacting this, but more importantly, I think it's funny, we're moving all the town employees out of the center of town to go to our new big building, and we're talking about how desolate the town is and why we need apartments. So it's kind of ironic that we're taking out the staff that consumes lunch every day, consumes gas, participates in the center of town, and we're moving them to the far end of the town. I will again reiterate that the financial data that's been supplied to us is totally deficient. We have no way to reconcile what we're getting. I will be freedom of information, all conversations that have been had with town employees now, because where's our salt shed? We're throwing away $700,000 of the town's assets. So this thing is going to have legs. It's crazy. I wish the people in charge had done better due diligence. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commentary? Tom Frenay. Well, actually, this gentleman here. And then we'll come to you, Tom Frenay. This gentleman right in the middle here. Behind Ted Keys. Yes, sir.
Hi, it's Gordon. Hi there.
Hey, Gordon. Give your name and address for the...
40 years I've been here.
Okay.
I live at 1575 North Stone Street. I think the objective is terrific. It's not a new one, and I think we should pursue it. But I think step one was a mistake. I think we should have valued our employees in their 50 years, almost 50 years of doing excellent work there. I haven't heard any talk about the employees, the safety aspects of going out on that road. I never would have picked that site. And we've been fixing and fixing and fixing the building as our internal experts have come forward to offer their opinions. They weren't sought. So I've just picked this up when Warren Packard wrote his article in the Observer, and oh my God, what's this all about? I've been digging. I can tell you that the employees are not with you. And I think that's a major consideration. This isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's not just about money. Even though I think some terrific work's been done. I've worked on a lot of business plans. They always look good. You never see a bad business plan. But you ought to see them unravel as time goes on. And so we're making, with all this uncertainty, we're going to I hope we don't jerk our valuable staff around and not value them like we should be. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Frenay. Thank you.
Tom Frenet, 489 Warnertown Road. A couple comments and then a brief question at the end. Somewhere back in November at the Selectmen's meeting on November 20th, Mr. Casey provided a several-page statement of the process he'd gone through so far up till then. And one of the things he mentioned is that he'd done presentations for the DTC and the RTC. And I would say that as chairman of the DTC, I'm not aware of such a presentation to the Democratic Town Committee, nor has anybody contacted me to make one. Perhaps it's different with the RTC, I don't know, but you can ask them here. But that would have been a good idea. But in any case, I just want to correct the record on that. Second question I had is, in all of the material that's been posted online, something was not posted there that was mentioned several times this evening, which is the changes made by planning and zoning to allow the development of 45 units of apartments or condos, which definitely increase the value of the property. Previous to that, they could have done mixed development with retail on the first floor and apartments above, but I believe this offers, in addition to a change in the kinds of things, but I think it also offers the developer a way to make even more money. And I note that the town's value of the property has not changed. And I know that that was suggested earlier last year, that the town should get an outside assessment of the value of the property, which we have chosen not to do. So when I look at this, I say, okay, we're going to do something with somebody to get financing for the remediation. So it will hopefully mostly be paid for by state and federal money or longer term taxes. We're going to buy a property on South Street for 2.4, and we're going to give the developer Ffyler Place, which is valued at $800,000 in our assessor's records, but could easily be worth a lot more than that now. I mean, I've been told that a parcel that's development ready for condos is worth $30,000 more than one that's not per unit. So my guess is this could be worth several $100,000 more than we think it is in its current zoning situation. So I'm just saying that the parcel is more valuable than we have been led to believe. That's good, I suppose. It makes more of an incentive to develop it, but let's be sure we're talking about what we're paying for this whole project by understanding that it's 2.4 plus a Ffyler Place parcel that's probably worth more than we think it is. And then the other piece was brought up in one of the meetings last fall, is trying to document what the owner's costs are. I think Kevin Goff brought that up at the November meeting, which includes the $100,000 for extending the road, which includes furniture, I presume, for the new location, with, a bunch of other things that are obligations of the town, besides this agreement to buy South Street and to give the developer this parcel. So I'm concerned, I think similarly to Kevin Sullivan, that we haven't seen a really clear, full financial description of all of the pieces of this thing. And there's a lot of pieces. It's very complicated. And it's obviously I think that this is really well intended. I'm just not sure it's the right solution here. And so my last piece is a question, which is the full text and the explanatory information for the referendum available yet, or when will it be? Thank you.
I don't know. Do we have it? Just a question, I would think. We're scoping that out right now. Are the questions available for the town meeting? I mean, we have the resolutions here. It's all right.
Well, I mean, the explanatory text would be
What do you mean by the explanatory?
I looked at the state statute on referendums, and it described in there that in many cases, most cases for referendums, not only is the text of what's going to be voted on at the referendum made available ahead of time by the town clerk, but the town clerk also can, after approval by the town council, post an explanatory text about what is being voted on. And could not just post it at town hall or on the website, but at several places around town to make sure people are informed. So I'd kind of like to see that ahead of time, not just when I go to vote.
I have not discussed it with the town clerk, but we will do that tomorrow.
Well, the resolutions themselves are already out. In fact, they were mentioned this evening. They're going to be mentioned again, and so that part of it is already in public.
Well, I haven't seen the minutes of last week's meeting of the selectmen, but I don't think the resolution to be voted on at the town hall is going to be the same as what's on the agenda here tonight.
It is. It is.
two-part question.
It's not. It's not going to say. It's not going to say vote on whether to go to a adjourned referendum or adjourned town meeting.
You're correct, Tom. The question will essentially be the same. It'll be altered into a yes or a no question from what appears on the notice of the town meeting.
Okay.
So that'll be altered into a yes or no question. That's a responsibility by statute of the town clerk. We've offered some suggestions, and those will be published beforehand.
Okay, well, that's good. Sooner the better.
Essentially the same question, again, just turned into a yes or no. So think of should the town of Suffield, and then rather than adjourn to a town meeting at the end, it'll simply say in a question mark.
Okay, the sooner you get it out, the better you'll get the right information to people. Thank you.
All right. Any more comments?
Scott Gilmartin, 759 Hale Street. I'm not exactly sure what Tom's suggestion was as far as the value of that property today. If anybody thinks that somehow we're leaving money on the table as far as what we're valuing that property today at in terms of this discussion, they're crazy. I mean, I think that the value that we're using for discussion purposes on the town's part is overly generous. I would like everybody here, everybody probably knows what Ffyler Place looks like, but go back before you vote and just take a look down there. How forlorn, how ugly that street looks. And just make sure you're comfortable looking at that for another 20 years. Because 20 years ago was the first time that I had any involvement with any kind of study with the Planning and Zoning Commission and other groups in town to talk about revitalizing Ffyler Place. And that's 20 years ago. Nothing has happened. It's stayed the same. It's going to stay the same for another 20 years unless we move that town garage. You can find a million things to carp about, find some little thing to pick at as far as this project goes. But you have to ask yourself, on balance, does it make sense? And if it makes sense, it's worth a stretch. And that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Any further comments? Yes, sir, in the back. Wait a minute. No, we're going to head. Michelle, if you would take this lady over here.
I'll come to you next. No problem. Andrea Lowe, 241 North Main Street. I think I agree with Brian Bannock and with Mr. Gilmartin. This is a fantastic project. I have the habit of going to CVS pretty much daily, and I look at that awful site all the time. It is terrible. We're so fortunate to have Melissa, who's pushing this forward and pushing development forward in our beautiful, beautiful town, and to finish up the town center really beautifully would be amazing. We're lucky to have this option. I think hopefully the employees will be happier once they get to a nice new building with beautiful parking and everything. The center of town really needs this project.
Thank you. In the back there, Michelle?
Yeah.
That lady standing up?
Yep. So, Sarah Rosewood, again.
Hello.
You know, coming into town, like I said, I'm new. I came from a Chicago suburb. We visited a lot of towns before we ended up settling on Suffield. We liked the fact that it was a little bit more rural and it was quite lovely to look at. Illinois is very flat. We like the mountains. But something that we've discovered since being here over the past 6 weeks is that we have to travel out of town to get things. Yes, we have Highland Park Market, but that's, they don't have everything for my 3 kids to get to. I've got to get to Target, which means I'm going into Enfield or I'm going into Windsor. My son goes to the gymnastics academy, so I pass this daily, and it is an eyesore, and it is ugly. I'm part of the forum page, and I find it interesting. They were talking about a Starbucks, and my Starbucks-loving heart was so excited about the prospect, and that was dashed. But even thinking about it, there's no place in town that you can, go for a cup of coffee and meet friends. And I like the idea that we're bringing in this apartment building and we're bringing in people that are going to visit town and that may want to visit town and have different commerce and different retail that, from what I've been told, has been failing. And the fact that this could open a lot more possibilities, it's going to bring in a lot more revenue and not allow the taxes to be raised. So I think it's really a win-win situation. Still thinking about the town employees and that being mindful of them, but sometimes involving them in the decision will also help sway them. But I'm excited about this prospect and seeing it move forward in the future.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Ted Keys.
Ted Keys, 40 Marburn Drive. Been in town for 30 years. We bought our house from Peg Mabley, who was probably a resident of Suffield for 30 years prior to that. When we were closing on our house, Peg lived there for a month while we redid the kitchen. While we were redoing our kitchen, her kitchen, or which would be our kitchen, we would pick her up on weekends and take her out to eat. And we'd take her to a little restaurant in that parking lot across from Ffyler Place. Maybe not everybody remembers this restaurant, but it was kind of behind where the CVS is now. And it was Peg Mabley's favorite restaurant. It was a terrific spot, and I don't know how long it's been closed, but it's been closed for a long time. That is a real eyesore area, and I think we really got to do something with it. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? I have any in the back? Kevin Goff's over here. Do we have any over here? This gentleman, why don't you pick him up first, please? Then we'll come to you, Kevin.
1160, I'm Bill Cushman, 31 Huckleberry Hollow. 1160 South Street is located at the extreme end of town on a major road where slow-moving town trucks entering and exiting and fast-moving traffic is an accident waiting to happen. A central location on a non-major road is a better location for a new town garage.
Thank you. Kevin Goff over here.
Kevin Goff at Thompsonville Road. I think everybody in this room really understands that the development and the improvement at Ffyler Place is going to do nothing but help the town. I think the diligence that we have interjected into the process has actually made some improvements from the beginning to the end. And I think sometimes it can come across as being critical and that we're leaning one way or another. We're really just trying to make sure that we don't miss something, that an expertise that we may have that could lend to a betterment of the project is really what we're after here. So some of the comments which sound like maybe some piercing questions are really in the intention of making it better, not trying to make it fail. And this is the best offer we have. It's the only offer we have. The question that we're going to answer in 2 weeks is it the right answer?
Thank you. Any other comments? I don't see any more hands. So now we're going to repeat the resolutions, second and third resolutions that are regarding what we're here for tonight. And I'm going to call on Brian Bannock to make those resolutions. And then, before everybody goes anywhere, we're going to conclude our town meeting and forward them to the referendum in 2 weeks. Brian Bannock.
Resolved to consider the development of town parcel on Ffyler Place, relocation of highway garage, including utilization of tax increment financing, including a credit enhancement agreement under the Town Center TIF District Master Plan and Policy, and adjourn to a vote at a referendum to occur on January 28, 2020. And resolve to consider the acquisition of 1160 South Street in an amount not to exceed $2,400,000 and the transfer of 44 Ffyler Place as a condition of the contract, and adjourn to a vote at a referendum to occur on January 28, 2020.
Thank you. Now I'll take a motion to adjourn those questions just read by Brian Bannock to the referendum to be held on January 28, 2020. Or you can second those. Okay, he seconded those. I don't think we have to vote on those because they're going to the referendum. But now I'll take a motion to refer those questions that Brian Bannock just mentioned and Derek Donnelly just seconded to the referendum on Tuesday, January 28th of this year. Is there anybody who's going to make that motion? How about you? There we go. Second? All those in favor? Aye. Take a motion to adjourn? Second? All those in favor? Thank you very much. Have a good evening. I thought Jim Sheridan would at least hang around. He did all this complaining and then